It's very interesting that Hezbollah is not overpaying its hand at the moment. It's very complex, it's very fluid, and I think it speaks volumes to the lack of engagement of the familiar sponsors, including the UK, France, and other interested bodies, in recent years in the Palestinian issue. It hasn't gone away, and it's blown up again. Truly with a vengeance.
Tell me, what did you make of what you heard there from Benjamin Netanyahu when he spoke about Israel taking on a security responsibility for Gaza?
Indefinitely. Really, that is a very, very big claim indeed. I'm not sure how many of his senior strategic advisors and commanders would be in tune with that, because recent history, the really hardened men in politics and in war, like Yitzhak Rabin, who was killed for his peacemaking efforts, if you could put it like that, and Ariel Sharon, both thought that Israel could not afford to be caught in the Gaza trap and be responsible for this overflowing refugee camp, effectively what it has been. And the population was much smaller in those days at the turn of the century. And I think that this is very dangerous to make a security commitment to Gaza like that from an Israeli prime minister, however gung-ho, however he may be speaking in the times of war. Because Egypt is absolutely crucial to what happens in Gaza, and of course some buy-in from the Palestinian people. And I must say, Mr. Netanyahu, as his governments have gone steadily to the right, haven't been very keen in any much buy-in from the Palestinian people.
What do you take, Robert? What do you take a security responsibility for Gaza to mean? Because if the Israel Defense Force succeeds in its stated aim of throwing down Hamas as a military force and as a political force, it leaves a vacuum there. So what does that security responsibility entail?
Well, since we're on science, and I don't mean to be facetious, nature abhors a vacuum, as we know. And that's the problem. Who's going to go in there? And I think that this is where Israeli police, reservists, and militia, because it wouldn't necessarily be regular forces patrolling the streets of Gaza again, I think that is so problematic. What Netanyahu suggested initially when he announced the operation, that they were going to go in Operation Iron Swords, which is the sixth or seventh even security operation over Gaza since Israel left in 2005. It was as if they were going to seal off Gaza,
yes,
lock it all up and throw away the key. Sorry to be facetious, but that is the image that came to mind. And it really is very, very difficult, because what the world is saying, what about 2.3 million Palestinians who still live there? Far too many have been killed. They can't all be claimed to be complicit. Hence, you get the charge of, is this collective punishment? And we really are in a terrible muddle. And the thing that I think you've been reflecting very well on your channel and many other, but Times Radio particularly, is that how weak the diplomacy has been about this. That you can't blame Antony Blinken, but he's getting no realistic engagement from the people he's talking to.
Yeah, look, Cat Needham's here and Rachel Cunliffe, Cat.
Thanks for joining. I was kind of struck, I think, by the Israeli defense minister, who I think kind of rode back slightly from the comments saying that Israel would not rule Gaza, neither would Hamas. I wondered whether you thought perhaps there had been some kind of back channel conversations, perhaps coming from the US or elsewhere, to try and sort of get that line out there, because, of course, there is this concern that it may inflame the situation. And to your point about the sort of vacuum that is being created, perhaps by the sort of certainly the sort of dismantling of Hamas to some degree. Who do you see as perhaps stepping into that breach that could be a reliable partner and someone that peace could be built from there out?
In the short term, realistically, nobody. The candidates that have been lined up, which is Fatah, of the Palestinian National Authority in Ramallah, which was defeated soundly in the elections when they were held 2006, I don't think that they'd get the confidence of the Palestinian people in Gaza. And that's quite clearly what the Israelis were hoping. The other guardians, which have happened in the past, of course, over the period, is Egypt. Egypt is more worried about this than almost any other Arab power because they do not want Hamas coming back, pulling back into Egypt, because Hamas comes from the Muslim Brotherhood, who they fear greatly. They have had trouble in the past with refugees, bringing disruption, violence, and organized crime into Sinai. So that's where there will have to be international engagement, in which the international community of whatever party you are, it doesn't seem to be prepared yet for it, but it has got to happen. Otherwise, things could become seriously unstable, particularly if things get out of hand, as well as in Gaza, but on the West Bank and in East Jerusalem, particularly the West Bank, and of course on the northern border with Hezbollah. But it's very interesting that Hezbollah is not overpaying its hand at the moment. It's very complex, it's very fluid, and I think it speaks volumes to the lack of engagement of the familiar sponsors, including the UK, France, and other interested bodies, in recent years in the Palestinian issue. It hasn't gone away, and it's blown up again, truly with a vengeance. And it is in a growingly complex world crisis, because things are changing in Ukraine, and we know that there is more than a dotted line between the Ukraine crisis and the Middle East Gaza Hamas crisis.
Rachel Conliffe.
Robert, thank you. It's always really interesting to talk to you. Now that we're getting reports that Israeli troops are in the heart of Gaza City and are surrounding it, what, if anything, does this mean for the return of the hostages, which is obviously one of the key aims? Does this put more pressure on Hamas? Are there back-channel conversations going on? Does this in any way lead towards that humanitarian aim?
Rachel, there will undoubtedly be back-channel conversations going, particularly with their prime sponsor in the Gulf, which is Qatar, which is where the political leadership of Hamas is. And that is the medium to long-term problem, because the aim of eradicating Hamas is just not feasible unless Israel somehow provokes a wider war. I've put that wrong. It could provoke a wider war, which Israel must avoid at all costs. Israel tactically is going for a familiar ploy, which is decapitation. They're going for the leadership. I don't know whether Mohammed Daif, who is the military director of operations of Hamas, is physically there, which they say he is, in his headquarters, as they put it, in Gaza City. The trouble is, I have to draw my breath. Targeted assassination, a favored Israeli tactic, I don't think works all that much. You could say, oh yes, they took out the leader of the Al-Quds force, very, very effective, Qasem Soleimani, 3 years ago. It still is going to be very difficult, because you've got to take into account the martyr factor. I don't think you can defeat Hamas definitively, because it will fragment, it will have supporters. We know it is part of a wider jihadi extreme Sunni movement